I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com and follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. And also on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and check off the notification bell to see our weekly videos. Every week, we interview film professionals to discuss their work, and this is made possible by our sponsors, OWC. For more information on how they can assist you in your filmmaking needs, go to owcdigital.com. Now, this week, I'm joined by colorist Damien Vandercruyssen, and whose work includes Zoolander 2, On the Rocks, Uncut Gems, and so many other great films. Welcome to the show, Damien.
Thank you. Hi, Gordon.
I guess my first question for you is, with regards to Uncut Gems, it's a very intense film. So I guess, how did you get involved with this project, and how did you get on the same page with the director in terms of the look of the film?
Well, it all started, we did a little rehearsal shoot with Darius Khondji, the DP, and Safdie brothers. They shot that Jay-Z music video. Mostly me, a few months before the shoot. So it was like a get-together team, see how we gel and how we if we're on the same page. And it went very well. Everyone was super excited. So that's how I got on board. I met with Darius a few times, and we were completely, also getting on the same vibe. So the filmmakers were, of course, very excited to work with such a legendary DP as Darius Khondji. And when he said, "I want to work with Damien," they all went, "Yes, why not?" So I was really, really happy to be from the beginning involved. We had a few challenges because it was shot on film and digital. So one of my main challenge was to see how we could match the digital to the film scenes, because the initial idea was to shoot everything on film, but then Darius thought he could get more detail from some scenes, the challenging scenes where he couldn't lit very well for film, so he had to go digital. And my mission was to make it completely seamless. Which I hope I managed to do okay, but I think I did. We actually used some grain that I asked them to shoot, some grain from that same camera body using the same lab. So it was like overlaid on top of the digital to make it more seamless, and then also building a custom lookup table that would mimic that film stock.
That's interesting. So they shot almost like a plate of just grain?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow. I guess that gets, because I remember in the early 2000s when everyone was like, mini DV's the future, and they're like, we just have to figure out how to get grain on it. There's a lot of really bad digital grain.
Yeah.
We had me nuts.
Yeah. For a long time, we had the baseline grain, and it was doing the trick. But at the very last minute, I was not happy with the plate grain that they had shot during production, and they were doing like a very quick pickup shoot. So I asked them to shoot that plate again, and that's the one that ended up in the final DI.
So did they shoot that against like a white wall or a green screen or something, so you could remove it?
Neutral gray.
Okay.
With same. The important thing was to do the same process and have a out of focus plate. So we really just scanned that grain and overlaid over the picture. What's interesting is that because they used the same lens, it was also adding a little texture, little slight vignetting that feels more filmic. So it did a great trick. And I remember when I put that in front of Josh and Benny's eyes, they were like, "Oh, yes." And I was like, "Oh, nice film." Like, yeah.
Now, you studied cinematography in France at the Lumiere.
Absolutely, yeah. I went to cinema school there, and right at the end of my studies, I did my thesis on color and color correction, because I was already kind of interested in that. And then at the end of school, I found there was an opening as a telecine artist. So assistant colorist, and so I did that for 2 years before doing my first jobs as a junior colorist, and it was mostly on commercials. but it's a great way to learn because commercials are really fast paced. You have a lot of different looks, and also back then what I really liked, and I look back saying, this is the right way to do it, is I was under two colorists that I was sitting with them all day long, seeing how they work, how they manage the room, their relationship with DPs, with directors, with agency. It's still like a learning process, and training your eyes, seeing what they see, and then going to the renders and making sure those always windows are in place the same way you saw in the session, because we had to reload the film at the end of the session. So it was not non-linear system, so we had to roll up the film and make sure it matches what they did in session. So it was like a great, and of course a lot of times it wasn't matching, so you had to very quickly learn how to tweak to make sure that you keep all the grade intact, but you just adjust for that lamp that has shifted slightly. So it was a great learning experience being assistant for 2 years.
What is something you learned from that period that you now pass on to your assistants?
Well, training your eyes. I think that's why I always tell them, it's like spend time in the room, see, and you learn. And probably because I learn on a very old systems, we didn't have many windows. So what I always tell my assistants, try to match in as little layers as possible. Keep it simple. Match grading should not, involve 10 windows just to match one shot to another. It's keep your grade very simple. It's contrast, brightness, saturation, color balance, and then you go into the secondaries. Don't rush it to, darkening that sky. It doesn't matter. It's you make sure the skin tones are consistent. It's it's a training. It's a education. Educate your eye to really see what makes a shot match.
Now, you talked about doing commercials. Now, when I've talked to cinematographers about shooting commercials, one of the things they love about it is they find that commercials tend to push the boundaries in terms of cinematography. Is it the same thing with colorists, that it's sort of pushing you to try new things?
Yeah, I mean, especially in music videos, I think that's where we had a lot of room to experiment. I found that true in France when I was for 3 years a chorus there on commercials, and I found that creatively we were more pushing things, and I feel like the US market is a little more timid in terms of looks and aesthetics. Maybe it shifted throughout the years. I think now we're seeing budget shrink, and the tendency is more to follow a look than to create one. So I think it was true. I'm having more fun now in film, because on a feature project, you really craft that throughout a long period of time, where I think also the timing of commercial as a colorist is shrinking by every year. We lose an hour or 30 minutes of session, and it's huge. And when I started, we used to do a 60-second commercial over 2 days. It was 16 hours, and now average is probably 6 or 8 hours. Wow. And then a 30-second commercial, which is also becoming quite rare. It's more 15-second commercials now. So they want to book 2-3 hours. And how do you craft a look in 3 hours? It's
well, and what's crazy is it's almost like the technology's gotten better. So you were saying, you could only do a few windows, but now they're you can do as many windows as you want. So let's give you less time, but you're going to need more time to make it look better.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing we learned definitely doing commercials, the speed. You have to be quick. But most colorists doing commercials, they already have their galleries of looks, but I find it boring, because, what's the point of coming, you have, so you want flavor A, B, C, D today? I'm more look at the footage, see what works. It's also something a tip I do with my assists, don't try to mimic the looks. See what's on the footage, and give it 100% of that footage, instead of trying to match to a movie that has nothing to do with it.
Interesting. So how did you make the transition from commercials to television, or sorry, to film?
Television and film. Well, it's slowly. I've tried for 20 years to do that slow transition. The commercial was again great training, great pace, and meeting a way to meet a lot of directors and DPs. It's really there's nothing like it. And even in France, I had done like a few projects. Usually, you start with short films. It's really by growing, and one day you have the opportunity to work on a feature with. Now the technology is the same, so if you have a DP you have a close relationship with, and they say, "Well, I'm shooting that film. Are you interested?" We can make it work. It's a bigger investment, of course, to be able to handle the whole DI, and the pipeline is different, but the machine is the same. You can apply your craft to a long form. And that was my goal from the beginning. It's like I went to cinema school, so I wanted to work on cinema. Like the short form is fun, and yeah, it's very creative too. It's like it's just a different scale for me. It's something that I really wanted to do.
Now, you made your transition from France to the US. What are some insights? Because there's a lot of people who want to make it to the US for filmmaking, or whether it's colorists or editors or filmmakers. What would you suggest in to them if they want to make that journey?
Yeah, it's a journey. Well, make sure you know the culture. It's like it's a different market here. That's why it took me a while to find my place, and the clients that would trust me, because if none, they had I was at the Mill, who was like a British company, so they wanted a European eye and talent. But it's also you're on the US with a US market, and the culture is very different. They like very poppy, very bright images, and I come from France, where it's quite moody, and grew up in Normandy, where it's very rainy. So I'm more used to desaturated and slightly moodier images, and it's also something that is not always easy to sell in a commercial. So I guess my transition to features is easier that way. It's making sure you're aware of the culture, and you're ready you have a few clients, because I had to start from scratch. Coming over here took me years to find new directors and DPs and agency people who would like to work with me, because I thought, well, there's a few French DPs that work in New York, but they have very little saying in like picking the colorist. It is not the case for features as well. It's like, working with Darius, because we're both French, or Philippe Le Sourd. Those are like DPs that knew my work, and when they had to do a movie in the US, they all, reached out to me, and that's also how I grew in that field. Because also filmmakers like that kind of aesthetic. If you work with a French DP, you may want to work with a French colorist as well. Mm-hmm. But we would speak English in the room, of course.
Unless you have to say something bad about the director.
Well, usually wait for the bathroom break.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting that you talk about the cultural difference, because years ago I talked to a group of editors in France, and they were saying that editing wasn't held to the same esteem as it is in the US. Did you find anything like that for colorists or DPs?
No, weirdly, I find that's like, I think in the US you had that kind of rock star colorist attitude that doesn't exist. A little bit in France. It was a trendy kind of work. Now people look at it as like, I think we still, stay humble, and we're like artisan more than, artists and rock stars. It's, keep it, the DP is the real star, and the director, we're not, we're just applying the look and making sure it looks consistent. But that I found like here in the US, like weirdly, some colorists there's like huge power over, the aesthetic of a movie, where I'm always trying to, first read the script and talk to the DP what they're looking for. So I'm not gonna walk in the room saying, well, this is the look of the movie. It's like there's no reason to do it. It's like a collaboration, and we love to experiment together, but there's no reason for us to say, hey, like, what about we try this on this movie? Like, if it could be like a director that has no idea where to go, but it's also not really interesting for us to come and say, oh, we'll do whatever you want. I had that on a few commercials where the creators were like, didn't know where to go. It's like, it's not the reason why we do this job. It's like, well, oh, okay. So oh, yeah, I got my little Crayola box and how about the red here? And, we could always do that. But it's not interesting. I think.
Yeah, it's not fun. There's no collaboration then.
No, exactly. Yeah, because that's what's at the heart of our
industry
skill. It's like industry. It's like collaboration. So if I'm the only one, and that was the challenge of the pandemic too. It's like having less, like not having the people in the room.
Yeah.
We still collaborate remotely, but it's not the same involvement. It's not the same. They're not, they're in their couch. They're at home. They're not in the room with us. Yeah. So it's like, okay.
How'd you ensure that? Because that's one of the things, like I could, I'm not a colorist, but I could color correct something here, let's say, and then I send it to you. You're not seeing it on the right monitor or the properly balanced monitor. So how did you ensure that they were getting a good understanding so that they weren't like, yeah, it's too blue, and then you come in and pull the blue down? And
yeah. Well, like a lot of other companies, we use the iPads a lot. The iPad Pros very like well calibrated out of the bat, and we have a few settings that we tell the clients to use. And I also have the same iPad in front of me, so I know how it's drifting compared to my X300, so I can tell the client, well, no, this is more like the iPad problem, or of course we don't say that on every shot because that would be a real issue. But we try to say, well, this leans. They usually do lean a little cooler.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, here I think we're going to be fine, or it's a lot of it is like reassuring, making sure like people trust you and that we see it the right way. It leans maybe one direction on the iPad, then you just say, well, that's that is what it is. Like we can't see it otherwise. So at least we make sure that it's okay. It looks very consistent. One iPad to the next, so we know we can trust it. 95% of the time, it's there.
95. It's closer than it was a couple of years ago. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Is there a scene or a project that you're most proud of, and what were the challenges that made it something you're so proud of?
I think one of the movies I'm most proud of is Waves by Trey Shults. DP Drew Daniels. I spent a good amount of time like building the lookup table with Drew when they were like already on location. We did back and forth, and then when we came to the DI, what I loved about it is with Trey, we really pushed things quite far, and Drew as well, of course. And one of in the middle of the movie, there's this transition part where it changes format, and there's like a brutal scene, but there's also this like changing lights of like blue and red and overlaying on a close-up of a lady's face, and it was like really great to have all the elements and build that transition in the grade.
Yeah.
And with the music, the score, it's like this was pretty fun, and I love that scene because it's like a very intense and emotional scene, and then at the end it's like it's like one of the few movies where I watched the offline, I was like in tears. So it's like, oh my gosh, it's like so intense, so emotional.
Yeah.
And being part of that was like really like just such a treat. What I loved about Trey is that he when he sent the script, he had like a little playlist that would come along, and as you read the script, you had that cue.
Oh, wow.
And when we graded, we also had that playlist on loop, so we were really like completely immersed in the movie. That was like really, really great. I love doing that. I did the same on Uncut Gems. They had the same same approach. Josh had built a playlist for his writing, and we were listening to that during the parade. I think it's a great inspiration to make sure you're on the same track and like you inspired by the soundtrack, really.
And how do you like to use color correction as a storytelling tool? Because ultimately, everything we're doing here is for the story.
Yeah.
So like in Uncut Gems or something.
Yeah. Well, usually you find the character, the emotion of the character, try to follow that. Do you want to reduce the palette? Do you want to go a little moodier for that? And not completely mimic it. Sometimes we, in waves, for example, we had, kind of selected a palette for one of the character and another palette for the second part of the movie, which is on the sister. So that's one way we played with colors. Sometimes you do, yes, you tend to desaturate a little bit when it's like a little moodier, a little more emotional, and write that. What's interesting on a feature is the challenge of like how much do you change from scene to scene? Is there an arc? Do you change from the beginning to an end, or do you want like one specific scene? And what works and how? Yeah, you have to be subtle, but also sometimes on movies with flashbacks, it's a challenge because like how much of the look do you want to change? Do you want to make obvious, or do you stay subtle? And it's like it's again collaboration, many different departments, production design and score will help, and storytelling will be here to do that too. So I think you stay subtle and try not to overdo it. I mean, I don't really like when it's the warm look.
Well, I talked to another colorist, and to help them track that sort of shift and stuff, they created like they put their frames up for each shot.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you do something like that? How do you track?
Yes, on Baseline you have that. You can have the contact sheet. Clients love that because it takes a key still of each shot, and then you display that, and you see the journey.
Yeah.
You can also select just a few shots from each scene.
Yeah.
So you just like see how you like to compose and make that palette evolve if you want it to evolve, or if you want to have everything matching. For example, on the Beguiled, we had a challenge there where we had a few exterior scenes that for Philippe were like too much of a change between the interiors, the moody interiors, the night scenes, and then those bright exteriors. So we kind of dimmed that down a lot. So when it cuts to the exterior, it still feels bright, but when you look at it on that contact sheet, it's actually not that far. So that was one of the things that he wanted, because all of a sudden you have those greens that you don't have inside. It's like some colors were like we had to mute them a little, calm them down a little bit so they don't jump at us.
Now I have one last question, and that is, we've been stuck in this pandemic for over a year now. Is there a show or a movie you discovered on streaming service that people should check out if they're stuck at home?
Well, I hope it won't be stuck at home for much longer and be back in the theaters. In the meantime, what can we show? You should probably watch Some Kind of Heaven by Lance Oppenheim, because that's one of the movies that I did. I came out during the pandemic. Very enjoyable movie. Shows, I guess by now everyone's seen Queen's Gambit. That was quite enjoyable.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the part and letting us interview. That's it for this week, guys. Make sure to check out filmmakeru.com for their latest courses, and follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. And on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell to see our weekly videos. Again, I want to thank you, Damien, for joining us. And of course, I want to thank our sponsors, OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking needs. I'm Gordon Raquel. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you.